Sir, please wake up, sir! With a dull thud, an old man collapsed helplessly onto the cold asphalt. People froze, startled, unsure, but no one dared to step forward. In that moment, a poor male student rushed in and grabbed the old man. Without hesitation, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the last $20 he had, everything he owned, and flagged down a cab. At that time, the student had no idea. He didn't know who this old man was, or how his own life was about to turn upside down. It was 6:10 p.m. in the downtown district of a major U.S. city. The streets, alive with the evening rush, pulsed with noise and motion. Neon signs flickered on between gray skyscrapers. Crowds thickened on the sidewalks as people hurried home, and then, right at a crosswalk, an elderly man suddenly stumbled and collapsed. Thud. His body hit the pavement hard. His face, framed by an expensive suit, had gone pale. Cold sweat collected on his forehead. One hand gripped his chest as he gasped for air, looking critically ill to anyone watching. People began gathering, little by little, but most kept their distance. Some raised their phones, others whispered anxiously. "Someone call 911!" A woman shouted, though she only paced in place. "Is that old guy okay?" "Somebody should do something. I don't know, CPR." Excuses piled up. People stepped back. The old man stayed on the ground, his expression twisted in agony. Just then, a high school student with a worn backpack pushed through the crowd. Caleb. 17, ordinary. His jacket was frayed at the cuffs, the soles of his sneakers nearly gone, but his eyes were sharper, clearer than anyone else's. Caleb dropped to his knees beside the old man. Sir, can you hear me?" He gently shook the man's shoulder, checking for a response. The old man blinked weakly, unable to speak. Caleb checked his pulse, his breathing, recalling every step from the first aid class he'd taken at school. "He needs a hospital, right now." He looked around. "Did anyone call 911? People exchanged uneasy glances. A young man finally muttered, "Someone said they called, but who knows when the ambulance will get here. It's rush hour. Traffic's a mess." Caleb made a split-second decision. He dug into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. $20.75. The last of his cash for the week. Caleb hesitated for a brief moment, then bolted toward the road. A taxi sat trapped at a red light. He waved frantically. "Taxi, over here. Please!" The cab rolled forward, inch by inch. Caleb yanked the back door open. "Driver, this old gentleman collapsed. Please take us to the hospital. Please." The middle-aged driver frowned. "Kid, in a situation like this, you call an ambulance. It'll be too late if we wait. He looks really bad. I'll pay the fare. I have the money." At Caleb's desperate insistence, the driver finally sighed. "All right, get him in, quick." Caleb ran back to the old man. But lifting him alone was impossible. He looked around. People were still just standing there. "Please help me. We have to get him to the hospital." His voice cut through the murmuring crowd. Two young men finally stepped forward, and together, the three of them carefully lifted the old man and eased him into the taxi. The old man's body felt lighter than Caleb expected. A faint scent of expensive cologne drifted from his high-end suit. He clearly wasn't just any old man, but none of that mattered right now. As the taxi lurched forward, Caleb held the old man's hand. It was cold. "Sir, just hang in there. We'll be at the hospital soon." The old man's eyelids trembled open. He looked at Caleb, eyes unfocused, and whispered with a trembling voice, "Thank you." Even that small phrase seemed to drain what little strength he had left. He closed his eyes again, and Caleb's fear sharpened. "Driver, Can we go any faster? Kid, I'm going as fast as I can. I've got to watch the lights. We're almost there. After what felt like forever, the taxi screeched to a stop at the University Hospital ER. Caleb jumped out, pushed the doors open, and shouted, "We have a patient here! Please help!" Medical staff rushed out. The old man was immediately lifted onto a gurney and disappeared behind the ER doors. Caleb exhaled deeply and sank down onto a nearby bench. His whole body felt hollow, drained. A nurse approached. "Are you his guardian?" "No, I just saw him collapse on the street." "I see. We need to identify the patient. Does he have any belongings?" Caleb shook his head. Just then, the doctor treating the old man stepped out. "He has a wallet. Checked his ID. His name is Mr. Sterling." "Oh, this person." The doctor's expression shifted. Subtle, strange. But Caleb didn't catch it. "There's a guardian contact number. We'll call them. Student, please leave your contact information just in case." Caleb scribbled down his phone number and turned to go. He checked his pockets. Only a few coins rattled inside. 75 cents. He had spent the entire $20 on the cab fare. Walking home would take well over an hour, but he didn't mind. If anything, he felt proud. He glanced back once at the brightly lit ER entrance. Hoping the old man would be treated safely, he started walking. The streets still buzzed with commuters, but his heart felt warm. His mother always said, "Being able to help others is a blessing." Even though he had almost nothing, today he felt, for the first time, how deeply joyful it was to help someone. His steps grew lighter. Mom would be waiting for him at home. If she heard what happened today, she would definitely pat his head and tell him he did well. Caleb walked for over an hour. The sun was gone, the streetlights glowing in its place. His feet ached, but his heart stayed light. It had been a long time since he felt this proud. It was past 9 when Caleb reached home. He descended the narrow stairs to the basement apartment, greeted by the familiar smell of dampness and mold. A ceiling that leaked when it rained. Tiny windows that barely let in sunlight. Winter cold seeping up from the cement floor. To others, it might look shabby, but to Caleb, it was precious. It was the only sanctuary he shared with his mother. As he opened the door, the warm smell of stew wrapped around him. In the cramped kitchen, his mother, Sarah, was setting the table. She was 37, though the hard years carved older lines across her face. Working night shifts at a convenience store, waiting tables at a diner during the day. Her hands were always rough, always cracked. But the moment she saw Caleb, a gentle smile softened all her exhaustion. "My son is home. Did you have a good day at school?" Caleb slipped off his shoes. "Yeah, it was good. Mom, I'm hungry. Let's eat." Sarah guided him to the table. Mac and cheese, pickles, the same simple dishes as always. Caleb ate happily. Sarah watched him, pleased, then asked, "But why are you so late? You're an hour later than usual." Caleb paused, his spoon in mid-air. He looked at his mother and slowly began to tell her what had happened that day. "Mom, today, an old grandfather collapsed on the street. It was at a crosswalk. He just grabbed his chest and fell." Sarah's expression shifted to shock. "Oh my! So what happened?" "Everyone was just watching, so I grabbed a taxi and took him to the hospital. His face was so pale. I thought it would be too late if we waited for an ambulance." Caleb reached into his pocket and placed the few remaining coins on the table. 75 cents. That's all I have left. So, I spent the $20 on the taxi. It was supposed to be my allowance for the rest of the week. He watched his mother carefully. Sarah stayed silent for a moment. Then she suddenly stood, gently stroking his head, so softly that Caleb flinched in surprise. My son did something truly amazing. That grandfather must have been in a worse spot than us. Aren't you upset, Mom? He asked quietly. Sarah shook her head as she sat back down. Why would I be upset? You saved a person. Money can be earned again, but a life, once gone, can't be brought back. She spooned some stew into Caleb's bowl and went on. There's something your grandfather used to tell me when I was young. He said being able to help others is a blessing. He said even if you're poor, the person with a warm heart is the truly rich one. It was the first time Caleb had ever heard anything about his grandfather. Mom almost never spoke about her family. Good job, son. Mom is proud of you. Caleb's heart swelled. All the way home, he had worried she might be disappointed, but hearing her praise made his eyes sting. You must have walked a lot, didn't you? It's far from the hospital to here. It took about an hour and a half, Caleb said, but it wasn't hard at all. Actually, I felt good. He continued eating. Sarah watched him, lost in thought. She felt grateful, deeply, that he had grown into such a good kid despite everything. Despite their poverty. Despite the whispers about him having no father. Despite nearly being evicted because they couldn't pay the basement rent. Caleb had never once complained. After finishing his meal, Caleb stood and said, I'll do the dishes. Mom, you rest. It's okay, No, Mom. You have to wake up at 3 a.m. for work. Go rest. Caleb insisted, gathering the dishes and taking them to the sink. Sarah's heart ached as she watched his back. This 17-year-old boy washing dishes in their tiny kitchen. At an age when he should be out with friends, he spent his time helping at home and focusing on school. It hurt to see. When he finished the chores, Caleb went to his room and sat at his desk. A piece of paper hung on the wall. His goal, written boldly. Medical school. Becoming a doctor. That was Caleb's dream, to make his mother's life easier. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. After Caleb drifted off, she quietly got up and stood by his door. Through the small crack, she could see his sleeping face, still so young. She went to the living room and took out a small savings jar. Inside was the emergency fund she'd been building, little by little, month by month. It was meant for Caleb's future college tuition. But she thought she should put at least $10 in his pocket tomorrow. Sending him to school with nothing felt too heartbreaking. At 2:30 a.m., Sarah woke before the alarm. She got ready for work quietly, washed her face, tied her hair. Before leaving, she placed a small note on the table. My son, stay strong today too. Mom loves you. Then she set a $10 bill beside Caleb's backpack. At least it would cover lunch. Maybe a snack. Her footsteps leaving the apartment were heavy, but her heart was warm. Thinking of the kindness her son showed yesterday filled her chest with pride. She realized once again what a blessing it was to have a boy who was poor, yet richer in heart than anyone else. The cold dawn brushed her face, but Sarah walked on. It was a 20-minute walk to the convenience store. Another long day ahead, but for her son, she could endure anything. The eastern sky began to brighten, darkness fading, a new day rising. Suddenly she wondered, what happened to the old man Caleb saved yesterday? Hoping he had recovered, she quickened her pace. The next morning at 7:30, Caleb headed to school as usual. When he saw the $10 his mom left, he was touched, but he quietly put it back into the jar and left the house. He knew how hard she worked for that money. He couldn't spend it carelessly. It was a 20-minute walk to school. A simple morning walk under warm sunlight. But as he approached the school gate, Something felt off. Students clustered together, murmuring, all staring toward the entrance. "Hey, look at that! Isn't that a limo? Whoa, it looks insanely expensive. Who comes to school in something like that?" Caleb looked up too, curious. A massive black limousine was parked right at the gate. Its gleaming body and dark-tinted windows radiated an intimidating aura. It didn't belong in front of an ordinary public high school. Just as Caleb was about to walk past, the back door of the limo opened. A middle-aged man in a suit stepped out. Gray suit, matching tie, a luxurious briefcase in hand. He looked to be in his 50s. Someone with authority, someone important. He scanned the students, then locked eyes with Caleb and walked straight toward him. Caleb stopped, startled. A nervous chill ran through him. Was this man here? For him? "Are you the student, Caleb?" The man's voice was polite but firm. Caleb nodded. "Yes, that's me. Who are you?" The man took out a business card and handed it over. It read, "Sterling Enterprises, Chief of Staff, Mr. Parker." Sterling Enterprises, a company so famous everyone knew the name. Caleb's confusion deepened. "You're the student who took our chairman to the hospital yesterday, correct?" Mr. Parker continued, his tone respectful. "The chairman insists I convey his gratitude." Only then did Caleb realize the old man he'd helped yesterday was the chairman of that massive corporation. His mind went blank. He had thought the man was just an ordinary grandfather who collapsed on the street, but he was one of the most powerful figures in the city. Mr. Parker opened his briefcase and took out a thick envelope. "The chairman asked me to deliver this as a token of appreciation," he said. "It covers your taxi fare, and more importantly, please see it as a small gesture of sincerity for saving his life." Caleb stared at the envelope, then shook his head. Students all around were watching. Their phones were out, cameras pointed at him. "Thank you, but I can't accept this," Caleb said, steady and firm. "I just did what anyone should do." Mr. Parker raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Son, this is a legitimate reward, directly ordered by the chairman." "I'm sorry," Caleb replied, voice trembling but unwavering. "But I didn't help him expecting anything." "Anyone would have done the same," Mr. Parker faltered. It was clear he hadn't expected rejection. "Student, this isn't just simple money. It carries the chairman's sincerity." "Mr. Chief of Staff," Caleb said gently, "I really appreciate it, but I don't regret helping him, even without a reward." He paused, noticing the phones pointed at him. It felt uncomfortable, but he continued anyway. "My mom always tells me, when you do a good deed, pay it forward. Accepting a reward like this in front of everyone, it just doesn't feel right." Mr. Parker studied him for a long moment. Surprise, then respect flickered in his eyes. It seemed he had never met a student quite like Caleb. "I understand," he said softly. "I will relay your words to the chairman exactly as they are." But then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. "This is my personal contact," he said. "If you ever need anything at all, contact me. Don't think of it as a reward. Think of it as a promise from an adult to an exceptional young man." Caleb hesitated, then accepted the card. The sincerity in the man's eyes made it impossible to refuse. "Thank you," Caleb said quietly. I should head to class." "Yes, go on," Mr. Parker nodded, then added, "And, student, the chairman truly wishes to meet you. When you have time, please contact us. No pressure." Caleb nodded and walked through the gate. Behind him, the limo's engine rumbled softly and then drove away. The moment he stepped inside, his friends swarmed him. "Hey, Caleb, what was that?" Did that guy say Sterling Enterprises? What did you do? That envelope looked stuffed with cash. Why didn't you take it? Are you crazy? Caleb grimaced. This was exactly the kind of attention he didn't want. I just took an old man to the hospital yesterday, that's all. That old man was the chairman of Sterling Enterprises? That's wild. One friend held up his phone excitedly. I filmed the whole thing. Can I post it? Please don't, Caleb begged. I'm serious. But it was too late. Some students were already posting photos and videos. Captions spread like wildfire. High schooler rejects reward. Student chooses conscience over cash. Ordinary teen saves Sterling chairman. By first period, Caleb tried to focus on the classroom board, but whispers kept rising behind him. Students from other classes peeked through the hallway windows. By lunchtime, things escalated. An announcement crackled over the intercom. Senior Caleb, please come to the principal's office. Caleb's stomach dropped. He walked there slowly, each step heavier than the last. When he opened the door, the principal, his homeroom teacher, and several strangers were waiting. Caleb, please sit, the principal said. The principal looked both proud and worried. Several media outlets have contacted us, he said. They want to cover your story. Caleb shook his head immediately. I'm sorry, but I don't want interviews. I just want this to pass quietly. His homeroom teacher gently added, Caleb, what you did was truly wonderful. It could inspire many people. Teacher, I just want to be a normal student. All this attention, it's too much. The principal nodded slowly. Understood. The school will block media inquiries as best we can, but we can't stop what's already spreading on social media. Caleb sighed. It felt like his whole life had become complicated overnight. When he got home, the sun was already sinking. He opened the door, exhaustion written all over his face, and his mom greeted him immediately, worry in her eyes. Caleb, are you okay? You don't look well. Mom, I'm fine. It was just a little hectic. Sarah pulled her son into a silent hug. Warm, steady, the kind of embrace that melted everything heavy inside him. That night, Caleb's story spread across social media like wildfire. What had begun as a few student posts exploded. Within 2 hours, tens of thousands of shares. A video titled High Schooler Rejects Reward lit up forums and news sites everywhere. Caleb sat in his room trying to do homework, but his phone kept buzzing nonstop. Messages poured in. Dude, you're the #1 trending search right now. Our school is on the news. You saved the Sterling chairman? That's insane. Caleb exhaled sharply and put his phone on silent. He had simply done what felt right. He never imagined it would become this. In the kitchen, Sarah was washing the dishes. Her phone, left on the table, rang over and over. When she finally finished and wiped her hands, she checked it and froze. A coworker from the convenience store had sent her a link. There was an article with Caleb's photo and a headline mentioning Sterling Enterprises. The moment she saw that name, her breath hitched. Memories she spent 17 years burying clawed at the surface. With a face struggling to remain calm, she called out, Caleb, come here for a moment. Caleb came into the living room and Sarah showed him the screen. What is all this? I saved the chairman of Sterling, Caleb explained softly. I didn't know the grandfather who collapsed was someone so important. His chief of staff came to school today, but I refused the reward. Sarah stroked her son's hair. Her fingers trembled, cold with fear, but she poured all her warmth into the gesture. You did the right thing, but Receiving this kind of attention must be overwhelming. Her voice carried layers Caleb couldn't understand. Not yet. Meanwhile, in a grand estate in the suburbs, Chairman Sterling sat alone in his study. A tablet lay open on his desk, displaying Caleb's photo. The moment he refused the envelope at the school gate captured perfectly. To think a kid like this still exists, Sterling murmured, deeply moved. In these times, purity like that was rare. He called Mr. Parker. Find out more about that student. Yes, sir. We're already investigating. Mr. Parker handed him a file. It contained Caleb's basic information. Excellent grades, good behavior, single-parent household, living with his mother. Sterling's expression shifted. He leaned closer, scanning the details. Mother's name? Sarah. His entire body went still. He removed his glasses with trembling hands, then put them back on as if reading wrong. Mr. Parker noticed the chairman's reaction. Subtle, shaken, but stayed silent. How old is she? Sterling asked, voice unsteady. It says she's 37. Sterling sank back into his chair, closing his eyes. He calculated in his mind. 37-year-old Sarah. A suspicion crept in. Could it be? But Sarah was a common name. He couldn't be sure. The student's father isn't listed, Parker added. Only the mother is on the birth certificate. Sterling's hands shook harder. Pain pressed against the left side of his chest. That night, sleep wouldn't come. He paced his study, haunted by a thought he never expected to face again. If that's Sarah, if she was truly the daughter he cast out 17 years ago, then Caleb. The next morning, Sterling summoned Parker again. Investigate the woman, Sarah, thoroughly. Get a photo. Understood, Chairman. When Parker left, Sterling remained standing in the dim light of his study. The memory from 17 years ago came rushing back, sharp and merciless. Winter, 2008. A hotel lounge. 20-year-old Sarah sat holding a teacup with trembling hands. 3 months pregnant, her belly still flat, but her face drained of life. Father, I want to have this baby. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Sterling's face turned a furious shade of red. Have you lost your mind? Where is the man? He left, Sarah choked. He said he couldn't take responsibility. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The man she loved, a senior from her college, had fled to the States to study abroad the moment he learned she was pregnant. You want to give birth to the child of trash like that? Sterling roared, his voice shaking the room. Are you trying to disgrace our entire family? People around them stared, horrified. But he didn't care. Father, the child did nothing wrong. I'll raise him, even if I have to do it alone. Raise a child alone? You? Sterling slammed a hand on the table. Make an appointment at the clinic. Tomorrow, you're getting the surgery. Sarah shook her head and stood. No, this is my child, no matter what you say. Slap. Sterling's hand struck her cheek. The entire lounge fell silent. Sarah touched her cheek, eyes wide with disbelief. Get out of my house. Right now. If you don't get rid of that baby, you are no longer my daughter. Father. The daughter of the Sterling chairman, a single mother? If the press finds out, what happens to our stock prices? What happens to our reputation? Sarah's shoulders shook. Was I just a liability to you? She tried to hold her father's hand one last time, one last desperate hope, but Sterling coldly pulled away. Choose. Give up the child and pretend none of this ever happened, or disappear from my sight forever. Sarah stood there for a long, trembling moment. Then she whispered, "I understand. I will disappear." And she walked away. She didn't look back. Her steps were stiff, her shoulders shaking. But she never turned around. Sterling thought she would return. He believed she would come to her senses, come begging for forgiveness in a few days. But Sarah never came back. That summer, Sterling heard news that a child had been born. A boy. He pretended he didn't know. He buried himself in work, drowning in deals and meetings, trying to erase his daughter's existence. Meanwhile, online, interest in Caleb only grew hotter. News outlets competed for interviews. Netizens filled comment sections. A rare, upright young man these days. He chose conscience over money. Amazing. His parents must have raised him well. At school, Caleb was overwhelmed. Every break, students from other classes came to stare. Teachers praised him endlessly. Caleb didn't want any of it. He just wanted his normal life back. During lunch, he escaped to the rooftop. He wanted quiet, just for a moment. But someone was already there. Jason. "You came up here to hide too, huh?" Jason laughed. "Yeah, it's too crazy." Caleb sighed. "But seriously, you're amazing. I would have taken the money." Caleb smiled weakly. "My mom always says, living with dignity is what matters most." At that very moment, in the chairman's office at Sterling headquarters, Sterling sat frozen. He was staring at a photo Mr. Parker had brought, a grainy image pulled from a convenience store CCTV. Sarah. She was thin, tired, life-worn, but unmistakably his daughter. "It's her," Sterling whispered. "That Sarah is my daughter." Mr. Parker looked stunned. "Then student Caleb is your grandson." Sterling collapsed into his chair. The boy who saved his life was the son of the daughter he cast out. Too cruel to be coincidence, too real to deny. What have I done?" Tears slid down Sterling's cheeks. 17 years of guilt, buried in the darkest corner of his heart, surged up all at once. "Chairman, what will you do?" Parker asked carefully. Sterling hesitated for a long time. Then, "I have to meet them, immediately." "But Chairman, if it's too sudden, I can't delay any longer." "I already delayed it for 17 years. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled and he sank down again. He didn't have the courage. With what face could he meet the daughter he had banished? That evening, Sterling drove with Parker to the neighborhood near Caleb's house, but he couldn't get out of the car. He stared at the faint light leaking from the basement window for a long, long time, before whispering, "I'm not ready yet." He knew it was an excuse. He knew no amount of preparation would ever be enough. But after days of sleepless nights, plagued by nightmares and crushed by guilt, Sterling realized he couldn't wait any longer. The daughter he abandoned, the grandson who saved him. Fate was mercilessly pulling everything to the surface. At 4:00 p.m., Sterling drove to Caleb's house, alone, no chauffeur, no escort. Just him, and a heart pounding with fear and desperation. He entered the address Parker had found into the GPS, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands. As he left the city center and approached the outskirts, the scenery shifted. Skyscrapers gave way to worn apartment blocks and aging homes. The closer he got, the faster his heart beat. Turning into a narrow alley, he stopped. The walls were damp, covered in mold stains. Trash bags were piled up along the sides. "Sarah lives here?" Sterling stepped out slowly, his feet dragged as he approached the stairs leading down to the basement. A rusty iron gate, a mailbox, a faint, faded name, Sarah. He descended the steps, one by one, each step heavier than the last, as if the weight of 17 years was crushing his spine. At the basement door, he froze. His hand hovered near the door. But he couldn't knock. He didn't deserve to knock. Just then, footsteps sounded from inside. The door opened, and Sarah appeared. Time stopped. Sterling's breath caught in his throat. His lively, bright daughter from 17 years ago was gone. In her place stood a woman with hollow eyes, rough hands, and worn clothes. A woman who had carried too much pain alone. Sarah was equally stunned. It took her barely a second to recognize the man at the door. Her father. The father who had not come once in 17 years. "Sarah, is that you?" Sterling's voice trembled. That one sentence took all the strength he had. "Father." Sarah's voice shook too, but hers was cold. Ice cold. 17 years of resentment and sorrow lived inside that single word. Sterling couldn't bear it anymore. He dropped to his knees, right there on the cold concrete. The 72-year-old chairman of a massive corporation knelt at the basement entrance like a man broken. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." Tears poured down his face. All the tears he'd held back for 17 long years burst out at once. Seeing his daughter's worn, fragile appearance, it felt like someone was tearing his heart apart. "To think you lived like this, in a place like this? Why did I—" His voice cracked. Sarah's tears fell too, quietly, painfully, but forgiveness could not come easily. 17 years of hurt ran too deep. "I met Caleb, my grandson," Sterling said, voice shaking. "That child saved me. Only then did I understand the enormous sin I committed." He lifted his head and looked at Sarah. His wrinkled face was drenched in tears. "Look at this home. My daughter, forced to live here because of me? What was I thinking? What dignity? What company? I couldn't even protect my one and only daughter." Sarah gripped the doorframe, her hand trembling. Her legs felt weak, ready to collapse. An apology after 17 years. But it all felt far, far too late. "Father, please stand up. This doesn't change anything." "No," Sterling shook his head. "It's right for me to kneel. I committed a sin that cannot be forgiven, not even if I kneel for the rest of my life." He bowed his head even lower. "Sarah, I know it's too late, but even now, I want to ask for forgiveness. I want to do anything, everything, for you and for Caleb." Just then, footsteps echoed behind them. Caleb was returning from school. He froze when he saw an elderly man kneeling at their door. "Mom, who is—" Then Caleb recognized him, the grandfather he had saved days ago. But why was he here? And why was he kneeling? Sarah's voice shook. "Caleb, this is your grandfather." Caleb's eyes widened. "I thought Grandpa passed away." "Mom, you said you had no family." "What? Grandfather?" Sterling raised his head, tears blurring his vision. "Caleb, I am your grandfather, the shameful grandfather who abandoned your mother 17 years ago." Caleb stood speechless. Shock crashed through him. Abandoned Mom? Then all these years? How much had she suffered? How much had she endured raising him alone? "Why?" Caleb's voice trembled with anger. "Why did you abandon Mom?" Sterling lowered his head in shame. "Because she became a single mother. Because I feared it would damage the company's image. I abandoned her. I committed an unforgivable sin." Sarah grabbed Caleb's shoulders. "Caleb, let's go inside. That's enough." But Caleb didn't move. He kept glaring at the man called his grandfather. "You never visited once. Not once. Do you know how we live? In winter the heater barely works. When it rains, water leaks from the ceiling." Caleb's voice shook with rage born from love for his mother. "I know," Sterling whispered, breaking down again. "I see now the weight of the sin I committed." He sobbed, not the restrained tears of an old man, but the desperate weeping of someone collapsing under guilt for the first time in his 72 years. Sarah's own tears spilled over. 17 years of buried sorrow burst inside her. "When Father abandoned me, I was 20. A foolish 20-year-old who knew nothing. But I had to give birth alone. Raise a child alone? Do you know how terrified I was?" Her voice rose. A scream ripped open after years of silence. "I worked 16 hours a day at convenience stores, just to buy baby formula, just to afford diapers. But Father, where were you?" Sterling couldn't speak. Every word stabbed straight into his chest. "What do you want now? If you ask for forgiveness, does it erase 17 years? She stared straight at him. "What's the point now? The one you abandoned was me, but the one who truly suffered was my son." Her voice trembled but stayed firm. "Please leave. We've lived well enough without a father." Bang! The door slammed shut. Sterling stood frozen in front of the closed door. His feet wouldn't move. After what felt like an eternity, he finally turned away. That night, over dinner, Sarah spoke softly. "Caleb, you were shocked today, weren't you?" Caleb lowered his spoon. "Why? Did you never tell me?" "When I was 20, Sarah said, voice faint. "When I was pregnant with you, he abandoned me. He said a single mom would disgrace the family." Her eyes reddened. Old wounds reopened. "Even so, when I was young, he was a good father. If I fell, he carried me. If I was sick, he stayed up all night with me." Sarah drifted into memories. Once, her father had been the safest place in the world. But that man, that father, turned his back when she needed him most. The next morning, Sterling came again. Very early. Sarah bumped into him as she stepped out to go to work. "Sarah, I told you, don't come." She tried to walk past, but Sterling knelt again. "I'm sorry. I'm truly, truly sorry. I committed a mortal sin." Neighbors passing by stared, whispering, but Sterling didn't move. "Stand up," Sarah said coldly. "Doing this won't change anything." She walked quickly down the alley, refusing to look back. But inside, deep in the corner of her heart, something trembled. Because no matter how much she tried to hate him, seeing her 72-year-old father kneeling like that was painfully, unbearably pitiful. That afternoon, when Caleb came home from school, he found his grandfather again. Sterling was sitting at the bottom of the stairs, looking utterly crushed. "Caleb, Grandpa is truly sorry." "You don't need to apologize to me," Caleb answered, his voice cold. "You abandoned Mom. Apologize to her." Sterling's shoulders sagged as if the words struck directly into his bones. "You're right. Everything is my fault. I don't even deserve forgiveness." Caleb walked past him and went inside, but he kept watching through the window. His grandfather stayed there until the sun dipped behind the rooftops. Even when Sarah returned from her shift, he was still sitting in the same spot. "You're still here?" she asked quietly. "Sarah," Sterling said, "I won't give up." "Why now?" Sorrow filled every corner of Sarah's voice. "Back then, I thought reputation in the company mattered more. Like a fool, I believed money and honor were more important than my daughter." Tears spilled down Sterling's cheeks. "Now I see what I lost." Without you and Caleb, everything I have means nothing. Sarah paused for a moment. Her breathing wavered. Just go. I don't want to be shaken anymore. She turned away. The sound of the door closing echoed sharply in the narrow hallway. That night, Caleb asked softly, "Mom, is grandfather a really bad person?" Sarah sat still for a long time before answering. "He's not a bad person. He just made a terrible, terrible choice back then." "Mom, you said he was a good dad when you were young." "He was," she whispered. "He was the best father in the world." "Then, can't you forgive him?" "Caleb, it's been 17 years. From the day you were born until today, your grandfather never looked for us. Can something like that be forgiven easily?" Caleb nodded slowly, but in his heart, he felt a faint, aching pity for his grandfather. The next day, and the day after, and the days after that, Sterling kept coming. Rainy days, he stood soaking without an umbrella. Cold days, he waited while shivering violently. Day after day, he never missed a single one. On the 7th day, Caleb stepped outside carrying an umbrella. "Grandfather, at least take this." Sterling looked up with startled eyes. "Thank you, Caleb." "I haven't forgiven you," Caleb said quickly. "I'm just worried you'll collapse like this." He turned to go back inside, but stopped. "Mom said you were a good father when she was young. Why did you change?" Sterling let out a bitter, broken smile. "People forget what's truly important. They chase success and think it's more valuable than family. Grandpa made that mistake, the biggest mistake of his life." Caleb didn't say anything else. He quietly went inside. But from that day on, something in his heart began to waver. Sarah felt it too. No matter how tightly she tried to close her heart, seeing her father stand in rain and wind every single day, it hurt more than she wanted to admit. Especially when she saw him drenched under the streetlight. The image overlapped with a memory of her father years ago, carrying her on his back and running through the rain so she wouldn't get wet. "Mom, grandfather is kind of pitiful," Caleb murmured one evening. "Still, Mom isn't ready yet." Sarah's voice trembled. The urge to forgive and the wound from 17 years ago were crashing violently inside her. "Mom, do you think you'll ever forgive him?" Caleb took her hand gently. "Mom, whatever you decide, I'm on your side." Sarah hugged him tightly. Then she looked out the window. Far away, under the yellow glow of the streetlight, her father was still standing there. Her resolve was weakening, but not enough. 17 years of pain cannot heal in a few days. 3 weeks passed. Sterling came every day. Rain, wind, cold, nothing stopped him. Sarah and Caleb never opened the door, but he never gave up. And then, one afternoon, someone unexpected walked into the chairman's office. A man in his mid-40s, oily skin, sharp, cunning eyes, an expensive but tacky-looking suit. His business card read, "Tabloid reporter, Chuck." "What brings you here?" Sterling asked, his voice icy. Chuck casually opened his bag and dumped a thick envelope onto the desk. Dozens of photos spilled out. Sterling's face hardened. They were photos of him kneeling in front of the basement stairs. Photos of him waiting in the rain. Photos of him standing outside in the cold. And it didn't stop there. There were photos of Sarah heading to her 3 a.m. convenience store shift. Photos of Caleb running in worn-out sneakers. Caleb eating lunch. Caleb walking to cram school. Even Caleb studying through the basement window. Chuck had been stalking them for weeks. As I dug around, Chuck said slowly, savoring each word, I uncovered something very interesting. The Sterling chairman has a daughter, a single mom, and you abandoned her for 17 years. Sterling clenched his fist so hard his knuckles turned white, but he held his composure. I even took pictures of that basement house, Chuck continued. Mold-covered walls, leaking ceiling. To think, your daughter and grandson live like that. He paused dramatically. If I publish this story? He pulled out a tablet and turned the screen towards Sterling. A draft article was already written. The headline screamed, "The Hidden Secret of Sterling Chairman, Abandoned Daughter and Grandson." Sterling inhaled sharply. This wasn't the first time he'd faced blackmail, but this time, it involved his family, and the rage rose inside him like a storm. "What do you want?" Sterling asked quietly. Chuck grinned. $3 million. For a man of your wealth, that's pocket change, isn't it? Sterling said nothing. For a long, heavy moment, he stayed completely silent. Then Sterling finally spoke. His voice was low, steady, like a man walking through fire. "Give me a week." Chuck smirked. "Fine, but exactly 1 week. By 2 p.m., if you're even an hour late, the article goes live." When Chuck left, Sterling stared out the window for a long time. 17 years ago, he had abandoned his daughter because of this exact fear. Fear of rumors, fear of scrutiny, fear of losing his precious reputation. And now, that same cowardice was threatening Sarah and Caleb all over again. That evening, he went to the basement house as usual. But something felt wrong. At the end of the alley, a car he didn't recognize was parked. Somebody sat inside, pretending to look at their phone. But Sterling knew better. Chuck's people. The next day, while Sarah was working her shift at the convenience store, a strange man walked in and wandered around without buying anything. Eyes glued to her as if studying her. "Are you looking for something?" Sarah asked, trying to sound calm. He didn't answer. Just walked out and continued loitering outside the glass door. Sarah's hands trembled as she rang up customers. Her instincts screamed danger. Caleb had his own encounter. As he left school, a man approached him. "You're Caleb, right? I'd like to talk. Just a quick interview about your grandfather." Caleb stepped back. "Who are you?" The man flashed a press badge. "I have a few questions." "I don't want to," Caleb said firmly. But the man followed him, all the way to the academy, snapping photos. That night at home, he told Sarah, "Mom, some weird guy kept following me today." Sarah's face drained of color. She had experienced the same thing. "We have to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone." On the second day, things escalated. A letter was in the basement mailbox. Inside were printed photos of Sarah and Caleb's daily life, their walk to school, Sarah at work, Caleb studying, and a message. "Everything will be revealed soon." Sarah's hands shook violently, but she couldn't call the police. If this was tied to Sterling, the scandal would explode even bigger. Sterling learned the truth that night. Parker brought him the full report. "Chairman, Chuck ordered his people to surveil Miss Sarah and Caleb. They even attempted contact." Sterling's face turned red with fury. He could tolerate attacks on him, but on his family? That bastard. Rage burned through him, but he forced himself to stay calm. If he exploded now, Chuck would win. On the third day, Chuck became even bolder. He walked straight into Sarah's convenience store. "Hello, Miss Sarah," he said smoothly. "I'm reporter Chuck." Sarah flinched, but kept her composure. "What do you want?" "I'm having a little chat with your father. Do you have any comments? How does it feel, being abandoned for 17 years? Sarah's hand trembled, but her voice stayed firm. "Please leave. This is my workplace." Chuck sneered and stepped out, but then stood outside the glass window taking photos. Sarah was terrified. She didn't know what this man wanted, or how far he was willing to go. That night, Sterling lay awake, tormented. If he paid Chuck the $3 million, things might quiet down, but only temporarily. Chuck could come back any time for more, and worse, it would mean Sterling was still hiding his daughter and grandson, still ashamed of them, still choosing reputation over family. He couldn't do it again, not after everything. By dawn, Sterling made his decision. He would not be a coward anymore. The next morning, he called Parker. "Parker, call the legal team. We're filing charges, stalking, extortion, everything." "Yes, Chairman." And Sterling inhaled deeply, gathering all his courage. "Prepare a press conference. I will reveal everything." Parker's eyes widened, but he saw the resolve blazing in Sterling's. There was no going back. Chuck still assumed victory. He pictured the $3 million already in his bank account. He had no idea that Sterling had chosen a completely different path. A path that would destroy Chuck and rewrite the fate of Sarah and Caleb. On the fourth morning, while Caleb headed to school, the same man approached him, more aggressively this time. "Caleb, is it true your grandfather abandoned you?" Caleb stiffened, but stood tall. "Who are you to ask me that? If you keep following me, I'll call the police." The man sneered and slipped away, but Caleb's chest tightened with fear. What if Mom was in danger too? That afternoon, Sterling visited the basement home, for the last time. Sarah opened the door. Her face showed exhaustion mixed with fear. "Father, lately strange people have been—" "I know." Sterling's voice was heavy with guilt. "I'm sorry. Because of me. You're in danger." His eyes held a fierce, unwavering determination. "It will be over soon. I won't hide you anymore. I will let the world know that you are proudly my daughter, and Caleb is my grandson." Sarah stared at him, stunned. Sterling placed both hands on her shoulders. "It's late, but I want to be a real father now." And then the 1-week deadline arrived. The massive auditorium at Sterling headquarters overflowed with reporters. Hundreds of cameras were pointed at the podium. The air trembled with whispers and speculation. Chairman Sterling was holding an emergency press conference, an event unprecedented in his entire career. Sterling stepped up to the podium. Dressed in a black suit, he looked smaller, thinner, as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Standing in front of the microphone, Sterling took a deep breath. His hands trembled slightly as he opened his mouth. "The reason I stand here today is to confess my past wrongs and ask for forgiveness." A low murmur spread through the room. It was rare, almost unheard of, for a conglomerate chairman to openly admit fault. 17 years ago, I abandoned my daughter, Sarah, who had become a single mother, using reputation and corporate image as an excuse. I turned away from my daughter and my grandson. His voice wavered. That was the greatest mistake of my life, and a sin that can never be forgiven. For a moment, the auditorium froze. Then, a blinding storm of camera flashes erupted. Sterling closed his eyes, steadying himself, then forced them open again. Tears glistened at the corners. Recently, a media individual discovered this fact and attempted to blackmail me. Demanding $3 million, he stalked and threatened my family. A ripple moved through the crowd. But that incident made me realize something, that I was still ashamed of my daughter and grandson." He paused, lifting a glass of water to hide how violently his hands shook. "I state this proudly now. Sarah is my daughter. Caleb is my grandson. They are the family I abandoned, but from now on, I intend to be a proper father and grandfather." A reporter raised a hand. "Why didn't you look for them all this time?" Sterling gave a faint, bitter smile. "Because I was a coward. Blinded by money and honor, I lost what was most precious. I cannot take back the 17 years I threw away, but I will spend the rest of my life in atonement." He lifted a document. "Effective today, I am establishing the Sterling Foundation. I will donate $10 million of my personal assets to support single mothers and their children." Gasps filled the auditorium. "And the blackmailer Chuck has already been reported to the district attorney. He will be arrested shortly." When the press conference ended, Sterling returned to his office. He sank into his chair like a man who had finally put down a weight he'd carried for far too long, exhausted but unburdened. That evening, the news overflowed with clips of his confession. Sarah saw her father on the TV screen while working her shift. Hearing him publicly call her his daughter, and Caleb, his grandson, stirred a storm of emotions inside her: anger, sadness, and something else, a fragile sense of relief. That same night, Chuck was arrested. Extortion, stalking, multiple charges involving other wealthy targets. He was sentenced to prison. After the press conference, Sterling's efforts only intensified. He pushed to establish the foundation as quickly as possible. He didn't want to help only with money. He wanted to rebuild lives, shelters for single mothers, vocational training programs, full coverage of children's education. He even named the foundation chair after Sarah, but Sarah refused. "Don't use my name. I'm not ready yet." Sterling understood. So, he stepped back, careful not to push. One morning, when Sarah left for work, she stopped short. The basement stairs, the rusted iron steps she had walked for years, were gone. In their place were newly installed stone steps, sturdy and safe, anti-slip coated, clean, solid. A few days later, the basement windows were replaced with double-paned glass. No more freezing air leaking in during winter. She knew. It was her father. But she couldn't refuse. Not when it meant Caleb would be warmer, safer. Sterling sought redemption in other ways, too. Once a week, he visited the single mother's shelter to volunteer. At first, he moved stiffly and awkwardly. But slowly, he grew close to the children. When they called him Grandpa, his eyes would sting. He'd never heard that word from Caleb, and he had missed it more than he could admit. He still went to Caleb's school, but no longer hiding. He stood from a distance, watching quietly. Sometimes Caleb noticed him. This time, Caleb didn't look away. He nodded, a small gesture, but filled with meaning. "Grandpa, you came again today." One day, Caleb walked up to him first. Sterling blinked in surprise, then smiled, overwhelmed. "Yes, I just wanted to see if you were doing well." "I'm fine, but Grandpa, how's your health? You look tired." Sterling felt something warm bloom in his chest, so suddenly he nearly cried. "Thank you. Your concern gives me strength." They walked together side by side. Not reconciliation yet, but the distance between them was shrinking, little by little. Sterling also made changes to Sarah's convenience store. He replaced the old refrigerator with a new energy-efficient one, redid the flooring, upgraded the lighting. The store owner was stunned by the improvements, but the order came from the landlord. because Sterling had bought the entire building. Sarah realized it immediately, but she didn't confront him. Seeing her father work so desperately for her sake was both painful and strangely tender. But she still couldn't forgive him. Not yet. 17 years of wounds would never disappear overnight. Standing at the microphone, Sterling inhaled deeply. The air in the auditorium felt heavy, breathless. He opened his mouth slowly. When the foundation launch gala was held, I invited my daughter Sarah and my grandson, Caleb, but they did not come. He paused, steadying his voice. Instead, my daughter sent a letter. He unfolded the note as if it were something infinitely precious. Congratulations on the foundation establishment. I think it will help many people, but I am not ready to stand in that spot yet. Please understand. Sterling closed his eyes. He read those lines again and again in private. The first handwriting from his daughter he'd seen in 17 years. The crooked little letters from childhood flashed across his memory. I love you, Dad. Many single mothers attended the gala. They held his hands, looked into his eyes, and spoke with trembling voices. Thanks to you, Chairman. I have hope. Thank you. I can finally live with my child. Sterling's throat tightened. My daughter must have felt like this. 17 years ago, she must have struggled alone, frightened and exhausted. How desperate must she have been? I am the one who is grateful, he whispered to one mother, for letting me realize this, even if it's late. People were moved by his sincerity. Even the media, once critical, began acknowledging the change in him. At school, Caleb found himself surrounded. Dude, your grandfather is amazing. $10 million? He's like a real philanthropist. Caleb didn't know how to feel. Part of him felt proud. Another part still couldn't forgive what happened to his mom. Sterling continued visiting the basement home. Not every day now, but every 2 days. The sincerity unchanged. Sometimes he brought muffins Sarah liked. Sometimes reference books Caleb might need. Sarah watched all of this through the window, seeing her 72-year-old father, hands trembling, gently setting down heavy bags. It moved her heart, but not enough. The wound was still too deep. Then Parker's phone rang. A call from the emergency room. Chairman Sterling has collapsed. Parker hesitated, then dialed Sarah. The ringing seemed endless before she answered. Hello? Ms. Sarah, this is Chief of Staff Parker. The chairman, your father, has collapsed. A sharp gasp burst through the phone. Sarah's hand trembled. Where is he? University Hospital ER. His condition is not good. Sarah hung up. She stood frozen for a long moment. The man who abandoned her for 17 years. The same man who had been apologizing day after day. And now he had collapsed. Her mind spun wildly, telling her she shouldn't go, that it wasn't her responsibility. But her feet were already moving. She went to Caleb's room. Caleb, grandfather is in the hospital. Caleb closed his book, studying her face. The fear, the conflict, the worry. Shouldn't we go see him? Sarah nodded softly. They rushed out to catch a cab. The ER was harsh with cold fluorescent lights. The sharp scent of disinfectant filled the air. Nurses hurried past. Patients groaned. Families whispered anxiously. Sarah and Caleb checked the room number and took the elevator up. The ICU hallway was almost silent. Only their footsteps echoed. Further down, an EKG beeped steadily. Beep, beep. Each tone tightened their chests. Parker stood outside the room, exhausted. You came. The chairman was waiting. Sarah steadied her breath and pushed the door open. Her father lay on the white sheets, gaunt, pale, a shadow of the man he once was. An IV line pierced his arm. An oxygen mask covered his face. He looked painfully fragile. His eyelids fluttered as they stepped inside. Sarah. Barely more than a whisper. Sarah approached the bed, emotions crashing over her. Anger, grief, pity. Father! The word barely made it out. Her throat tightened. Caleb stood beside her, trembling. His grandfather, the man he had saved, looked so breakable now. Grandfather, if you go like this, there are no more chances. Sterling blinked up at them, as if seeing Caleb clearly for the very first time. The kind boy who saved him. The boy he had never held, never known. He struggled for breath, then spoke, muffled by the mask. If I had just a little more time, I wanted to stay by your side, as a father, as a grandfather. At those words, tears finally spilled from Sarah's eyes. Were these the words she had wanted for 17 years? Or were they too late? Caleb reached out and held Sterling's trembling hand, cold, wrinkled, but alive. Grandfather, please stay strong. We still have so much to talk about. Tears flowed down Sterling's face, too. It was the first time his grandson had ever held his hand. That warm, steady touch. Sterling felt grateful in a way he couldn't describe. The hospital room lights glowed softly around the three of them. Outside the window, the city glittered with distant night lights. But inside, it was quiet. Still. Only the beeping of the EKG and the faint hum of the oxygen machine filled the silence. Mr. Parker stepped in quietly. The doctor says it's due to overwork and stress. He needs absolute rest. Sarah nodded, then looked back at her father. Seeing him this frail, this diminished, she suddenly understood just how hard he had pushed himself over these past weeks. Foundation work, daily volunteer shifts, coming to their doorstep again and again. Why did you push yourself like this? Her voice was a mixture of anger and worry. Because it felt like I didn't have much time. I'm 72. I don't know how long I'll stay healthy, or how much time I have left with you. His voice kept breaking, fading. Even speaking seemed to exhaust him. Stop talking. You need to rest. Sarah tried to quiet him, but Sterling continued, fighting for breath. I'm sorry, truly sorry. When you needed me most, I wasn't there. Sarah gently took her father's hand. It was cold, so cold. She realized it had been 17 years since she last held it. The hand that once felt so large, so strong, now seemed small, fragile. Enough, she whispered. We can't change the past. Caleb looked between them, his mother and grandfather. 17 years of pain sat between them like a heavy weight, but the fact that they were all here, in this same room, at this same moment, it felt important, like something was shifting. Night deepened. Through the window, the sky turned ink black. The hallway outside grew quiet. Sarah and Caleb stayed. Neither could bring themselves to leave. Sterling drifted in and out of sleep. Each time he woke, he glanced anxiously at the two chairs beside him, as if terrified they might be gone. We're here, Grandpa, Caleb whispered each time. Sterling would relax, close his eyes again, like a child soothed after a nightmare. Around 2 a.m., Sarah stepped into the hallway for a coffee. The bitter warmth steadied her. Mr. Parker approached gently. The chairman has changed a lot, he said softly. Since the press conference, he's like a different person. Sarah stared into her paper cup. It's too late. 17 years? But isn't it fortunate, Parker said quietly, that he realized it at all? Some people pass away without ever realizing their mistakes. Sarah didn't answer. The truth of his words didn't erase the ache in her heart. When she returned to the room, Caleb was dozing in the chair, head tilted to the side in exhaustion. Sterling was awake, watching his grandson with a gaze full of affection, longing, and regret. "He's a good kid," Sterling whispered. "You raised him well." "It was hard raising him alone." Sarah's reply carried no bitterness, just a simple truth. Sterling closed his eyes, pained. If I had been there?" "Those ifs don't matter anymore," Sarah said quietly. "What matters is from now on." Sterling looked at his daughter, eyes widening slightly. Was this forgiveness, or simply acceptance of reality? He didn't know, but it was the first warmth he had felt from her in 17 years. The morning sun rose softly over the hospital. Gentle light streamed through the window, stretching 3 long shadows across the floor. Shadows that had once pointed in different directions, now overlapping in one place. After 17 years of silence, they were sharing the same space, the same air, the same moment. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was the first glimpse of a new beginning. Discharge day came. Sterling was still pale, but so much better than a week ago. Sarah and Caleb helped with the paperwork, guiding him gently. Inside the elevator down to the lobby, Sterling spoke carefully. "How about coming back home now? I know I only caused you pain all this time, but I want to spend whatever time I have left as a family." His voice trembled, desperation and fear intertwined. Sarah looked away. She couldn't answer immediately. Outside the hospital, spring sunlight warmed her face. She sank onto a bench, staring up at the bright sky. Memories flooded her mind like a film reel. Her father bowing his head on stage, putting aside all pride before the world, admitting his sin with a shaking voice. Chairman Sterling, a man who once valued reputation above all, confessing his failure as a father in front of countless cameras. That couldn't have been easy. Then the foundation, the shelters, the education support, all built carefully, quietly, respectfully. When she refused to have her name used, he let it go without argument. He waited. She remembered the basement, her father standing there in the rain, shivering in the cold, returning again and again, never giving up. 72 years old, and he still waited with such stubbornness. And then the scene in the hospital room. His trembling hand reaching out, his voice weak yet sincere. "If I had a little more time, I wanted to be by your side." All of it, every effort, every step, had been melting the ice in her heart, bit by bit. Sarah inhaled deeply. "My wound isn't completely healed," she said quietly. Sterling's face fell, but she continued. "But I don't want to spend the rest of my life hating my father." Sterling's eyes widened. He almost didn't believe what he heard. 17 years was long, Sarah said. So long, so lonely. "But the things you've done recently, I think I finally understand that sincerity." Caleb stepped beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. He knew better than anyone how hard she'd fought alone for 17 years. "Then, let's try living together, Mom." His voice was warm, gentle. Sarah's eyes filled instantly. She didn't realize her son's embrace could feel so strong, so comforting. When had he grown up so well? Sterling choked on emotion, nodding silently. His throat was tight. Words refused to come. Forgiveness after 17 years, not perfect, not complete, but a chance to start again. And for him, that alone was a miracle. "Thank you," Sterling whispered. "Truly, thank you." Tears slipped down his wrinkled cheeks. The car drove slowly toward the wealthy suburbs. For Sarah and Caleb, who had lived their entire lives in a tiny basement, the wide, tree-lined roads and luxurious homes felt like another world entirely. But now, this place would become their new home. The gate opened. A large garden unfolded before them, and the grand house appeared. Warm, familiar. Sarah remembered playing here as a child. She once believed this home would always protect her. She never imagined she would return. 17 years later. When they opened the front door and stepped inside, a soft warmth greeted them. In the living room, a dining table set for 3 waited quietly, as if the house itself had been waiting for this family to come together again. New tableware was set neatly at places that had been empty for so long. Quiet seats that finally had people to return to them. "I prepared your rooms too," Sterling said gently. "I left your old room just as it was, and I decorated a new one for Caleb." Sarah walked slowly up the stairs. Her footsteps felt unfamiliar on floors she once knew by heart. When she opened the door to her old room, it was as if time had stopped. The desk, the bed, the bookshelf, everything was exactly the same. Clean, untouched, preserved with devotion. "I cleaned it every day," Sterling said quietly from behind her. "Thinking someday you would return? No, hoping you would return." Sarah picked up a photo frame from the desk, a high school graduation picture, the last photo she took with her father. "I was happy back then." Her voice was wistful, soft, not angry. Caleb wandered into his new room, wide, bright, warm, a sturdy desk, a bookshelf, and even a new computer. It was a different world compared to the cramped basement where he had always lived. "Grandpa, this is too much." "No," Sterling replied. "This isn't enough. I couldn't do anything for 17 years. Hearing that, Caleb didn't refuse anymore. He understood what his grandfather was trying to say. Dinner time arrived. For the first time, the 3 of them sat around the same table. Warm stew, roast beef, and colorful side dishes filled the plates. It was different from the simple basement meals, but the warmth was the same. "Let's eat," Caleb said brightly. Sterling watched his grandson eat with a full heart. Only now did he realize how precious this ordinary moment was. "Caleb, how is school? If you need anything for studying, tell me." "It's okay, Grandpa. I'm doing well." Sterling laughed, full of pride. Sarah had raised him well, better than well. After dinner, they sat in the living room. "Father," Sarah began, "I want to keep working. Whether it's the convenience store or something else, there's no need now. You can just rest." "No." Sarah's voice was firm. "I want to work with my own hands. That is my life." Sterling nodded quietly. He understood his daughter's pride. Night settled gently. Caleb went upstairs first, leaving Sarah and Sterling in the quiet living room. Outside, the city lights glimmered faintly. "Sarah," Sterling said softly, "I'm truly sorry. And thank you." "Stop it already. Are you planning to keep apologizing forever?" Sarah let out a small laugh. Seeing that smile, her real smile, Sterling felt his heart swell. It was the first time he'd seen it in 17 years. Sarah looked out toward the sparkling night and spoke in her heart. Forgiveness doesn't come in a day, but remembering the time, the sincerity her father had poured out. She realized they had chosen to become a family again. The shadows of the three of them stretched across the living room wall, no longer separate, but side by side. The scars remained, but the healing had begun. It was late, but not too late. Starting again, in the name of family. That was the path they chose. Warm light wrapped gently around them. Outside, the wind blew cold, but inside, the house was warm, as if a long 17-year winter had finally ended and spring had come. If today's story brought even a small resonance to your heart, please like and subscribe so we can return with more gentle stories to comfort your days ahead. And leave a warm word for today's protagonist in the comments. Your single message becomes an unforgettable gift to someone. We're always cheering for your today.